Стадион. Емисија за вашата вистина.
Добар ден за вашата екселенција, амбасадорката на Соединетите американски држави во Македонија, Анџела Агелер. Господи Агелер, првата посета на некој град како амбасадорка ви беше во Штип. Ми се чини дека многу често доаѓате во Штип. Кои се причините? Пастромајлија, моден шопинг, или Штип е град на модата, локалната самоуправа?
Thank you. Slowly. Thank you so much for the invitation. I love radio. It's fun to be here with you. I have a special fondness for Stip. My Macedonian teacher, before I came my first time to this country in 2010, was from Stip. And she talked a lot about Stip and Lydia, and I learned a lot about Stip before I ever stepped foot in this country. And the first thing I had when I came to Stip was, of course, Pastramaliya. Since then, I have spoken with many mayors around the country who disagree that Stipska Pastramaliya is the best, but I still think it's pretty darn good. So.
Борбата против корупцијата е главен приоритет во секој извештај за Македонија.
Да.
Комисијата за спречување на корупцијата во сите тие извештаи беше една од ретките светли точки. Ретки институции со позитивни оценки, со забелешка дека незината гласност се удира во зидот на непостапувањето на другите институции и нејасни и недоволни ингеренции. Кој е вашиот коментар?
Well, first of all, as you know, corruption in this country is an issue of great concern for us. The United States Embassy here, since independence 32 years ago, has invested an enormous amount in the rule of law and in the justice system. And yet we continue to see, particularly in the last 10 years, an increase in corruption. In terms of the Anti-Corruption Commission, what we have seen in the selection of the new members has...
Да, како коментирате изборот? Имаше многу забелешки од невладиниот сектор дека партиите пак се договориле, дека не влегле од невладиниот сектор и дека ги форсирале членовите кои се блиски до партии.
Well, you know, you can say that about almost any organization in this country. We watch those kinds of selections very carefully. And so nothing at this point has given us grave concern, but more importantly at this stage, we will be looking at how that organization and others actually behave and look at the decisions that they make as new members are selected for this commission and for others, frankly, in the judicial sector. We watch very closely to see their actions. And not their words, and not the words of political parties either. The question is for the individuals that serve within the judiciary, whether it's on a commission against corruption, and they're not formally a part of the judiciary, of course, but their findings have an impact. So as we talk about them looking across sectors, what are their findings, what are their decisions, and what are their actions? And we will be watching that very closely.
Фокусот на борбата против корупцијата е интензивно присутен во сите ваши пораки, во ангажманот на американската држава. Црната листа е сериозен и силен инпут во таа насока. Деновиве листата стана побогата за големи имања од економско-политичката фела. Кој е вашиот одговор на критиките и релативизирањето на влијанието на овој механизам, дека не секојаш се присутни со одветните имиња, дека со дел од тие луѓе многу често се сликале американски официјални представници порано, дека станува збор за успешни бизниси кои вработуваат многу луѓе?
Well, that's a great question, and I know that there are pictures of many former ambassadors and of me taken with various individuals who have since been sanctioned or designated by the United States. I had my picture taken with Nikola Gorevsky and Sasha Mielkov when I was here before. So, and every time I walk through the airport here, every time I arrive or leave, I have people take selfies, ask me to take selfies with them. And honestly, I don't know who everyone is. Having a photo taken with somebody is not an endorsement of what they do. And so the first most important point I would make is that when the United States designates an individual, whether through the Department of State or the Department of Treasury, regardless of the law of the designation, that is based on evidence. It is not based on a feeling. It's not based on suspicions, which we have heard recently. The United States might suspect. No. The United States knows because it has gathered and carefully reviewed evidence until the point that we can be completely confident that this individual has engaged in corrupt activities and broken the law of this country. And U.S. law requires us then to designate them under a particular, whether it's Treasury law or Department of State or even Commerce. And so this is not a personal vendetta. This is 100% based on our law.
Во дел од тие образложенија стои дека одредени лица се казнуваат поради значителна корупција. Од друга страна, обвинителството и судството немаат процесирано ништо за нив. Дали црната листа треба да се свати како порака и насока за постапување на правосудните институции? И дали од тој аспект чувствувате разочараност?
Well, that's a really important question and one that we have been asked a lot. Again, this goes back to U.S. law and also how the designated individuals interact with the United States, which means whether or not they are allowed to come back into the United States, whether or not their assets in the U.S. are seized, whether or not the U.S. Shuts down banking systems that are available to them that go through the United States, as much international banking does. And so when we designate an individual, it affects our relationship with them. It does not require that Macedonian institutions take certain actions, though a law was recently passed that once the United States, as well as the EU and the UN, designate individuals, that law enforcement and prosecutors here and the Financial Investigative Unit will start looking into their assets and whether or not these should also be considered for seizure or other aspects. We don't play a law enforcement role in this country, but we would hope that the information that we gathered, which most of it from here, that there are those within law enforcement and the judiciary will also pursue those cases and hold people accountable for their activities, for what we have shown through evidence to be criminal, organized crime, financial criminal activities and corruption.
Интересен момент за последната личност, ставена на црната листа Кочо Ангјушев е дека пред околу еден месец новинарите кои се во судски процес со неговата компанија, АНЕРЕЛА, беа ваши гости во амбасадата. Може би тоа требаше да го прочитаме како сигнал покрај јавната поддршка на медиумите и новинарството и за наредните тенденции на листата. Тоа е моја забелешка. Треба ли да се очекува засилен тренд и покрупни зверки? Како ќе се наближуваат изборите? Како рековте, имаме епидемија на корупција, дали ќе имаме епидемија на црната листа? Еве, во претходните образложенија се споменуваа како поврзаност и поранешен генерален секретар на владата Драги Рашковски и поранешниот премиер Зоран Заев, кој патем речено застана во одбрана на Кочо Ангјушев.
There was a lot in that question.
Yes.
And I'm grateful for it. Because, first of all, again, we are required to designate an individual when we have seen the evidence that then requires the Department of State or the Department of Treasury to say, or Tsekomchev, as you mentioned, found, first of all, for these corrupt activities, and then the organizations that he was involved with as well. The role that, to touch on IRL, the role that journalism plays even with you and I having this conversation today, the role that journalists play in fighting corruption is so critical in this country. And the fact that a judge found that the journalists, the award-winning journalists from IRL and the internationally recognized journalists from IRL, for a judge to suggest that IRL is not a media group and that they are not journalists is laughable. It is absurd. And we wanted to be very clear at the embassy that we called them out on that, because it is an absolute absurdity. And journalists who, despite threats to themselves and their families, ask the hard questions, pursue cases, look for evidence, the fact that they were then, had this case brought against them, which was upheld, is again laughable. On the other hand, when someone is designated by the United States, as the former Deputy Prime Minister just was, and he says that it is, simply based on suspicions or dislike, and that he will pursue some kind of remediation, I will simply say that, again, we do not designate individuals based on suspicions. We do not designate people based on how we feel about them. There's nothing personal about it at all. It's a legal process, and as with other legal processes, those who have been designated are very welcome to hire U.S. attorneys and to pursue their dissatisfaction with the case. But I will say that we are confident in designating this individual because of the evidence that we have. And so he is welcome to pursue that, but I am confident that announcement will be upheld.
Че има ли епидемија на нови личности на црната листа?
I think the epidemic, it is an epidemic of corruption in this country. And, and it's not literally a blacklist, but the list of those who have been sanctioned or designated by the United States is, again, a legal formulation for us. What happens with that is up to the people of this country and the officials of this country. But I will tell you that I've been very impressed that the response from citizens that I have gotten to each one of our designations has been overwhelmingly positive. The reaction that we probably get most commonly is, please add more names. And so is the whole point for the U.S. Embassy to have a list? No. In fact, it would be great if there was no more corruption and we had no names to say. I don't imagine that happening anytime soon. Do you? Because there's still plenty of candidates.
Ве прашаа на брифинг и за Заев, ама не се даде коментар.
The former prime minister is somebody who I've spoken with not recently, and he spoke out on behalf of a friend, and he's certainly entitled to do so. But I will say that, as with the designation of Orce Kamchev and his organizations, what we saw was that frequently with these designations and with corruption, who you do business with can affect you and your family. And so, he is absolutely within his rights to say anything he would like to about his friend.
Кај црната листа, уште еден момент е многу битен, меѓутоа како да е заборавен. Многу важен сегмент како основ за ставање на црната листа. Личности кои влијаат на стабилноста, односно на дестабилизираат државата и регионот, непочитувањето на рамковниот договор, шират примитивен национализам, работат против евроинтеграциите на Македонија. Тоа беше порано присутно. Сега како да го забравате, се фокусирате само на корупција. Не ви е битно ова?
I don't think we have only focused on corruption. I think we get a lot of attention. I get a lot of attention. The embassy gets a lot of attention for that. But it wouldn't be at all accurate to say that that is our sole focus. In fact, our highest priority at the embassy is supporting this country in its efforts to become fully integrated within Europe. Now, there are certain requirements of this government in order to move forward with EU accession. We have encouraged them to make those decisions, whether it's the opposition party or whether it's the government in power, to make the tough decisions once again to pass amendments in order to move forward. But the important thing is that the country make the reforms that are necessary to fully integrate it within Europe. And that's an area in which sometimes that becomes, and frequently that becomes not only with us, but other European member state countries and the EU Ambassador Gear, the conversation that what's so critical is that the government make the reforms, including within the judiciary, but also within health, education, and other sectors, to fully integrate themselves into Europe. That will make this country stronger. It will make it more stable. It will make it more prosperous. And it will bring the kinds of opportunities that people want so that they don't have to leave the country to look for opportunities elsewhere.
Имаме застарување на судски предмети поради нови закони, рокови, фиока, неажурност. Кои се вашите очекувања и коментари во однос на лекот што треба да се избере и употреби? Се споменуваше реизбор на судството на судиите, ветинг, потекло на имот. Дали е возможно пак да се врати во оптек и старата идеја за странски суди и обвинители?
You know, I think that's a decision for, and we've talked about all these things. How do you reform the judiciary? Do you vet all of the judges within the judiciary now? Do you start new? That's something that the voters of this country are going to have to guide their government in making those tough decisions, because that's not for us to say how you should reform the judiciary. We are here to help. I just came from the University of Stipp law faculty, where they have the most beautiful courtroom I have ever seen in this country is at the university, and it's absolutely beautiful. And it's great to have the equipment, it's great to have the conversations, but at the end of the day, the individuals within any given sector have to be held accountable. They have to say no to influence from politicians or business people. They have to make the hard decisions so that they protect their country. And now how that process works is up to the country. Should judges and all officials be vetted? Should their income be examined? I think so. Ours is. Every year I have to go through a complete financial disclosure, as does my husband. It's normal. It's not unusual. And so I think those questions are not for me to answer, but I think they could help.
Присуството на државниот секретар Ентони Блинкен на Министерскиот совет на ОПСЕ во Скопје беше силна заложба за функционирањето и важноста на оваа организација, но секако и израз на голема почит и поддршка на партнерството со нашата држава. Помошникот државен секретар Джеймс О'Брајан се сретна со владините представници и оствари средба со опозицијата. Веднаш после интервјуто за 360, во кое многу категорично јасно упати порака до партиите, но пред се до граѓаните во врска со неопходноста од уставните измени. Не би гласала за оној кој вели имам подобра понуда, а не кажува каква е. Никогаш не би купил ниту автомобил од него. Еве, поинаку директно да ве прашам, би купиле ли вие автомобил од некој од нашите политичари?
Well, I'm not actually in the market for a car at the moment, so I won't be buying a car from anybody. I'm not allowed to drive here in Macedonia, so I won't be buying a car anytime soon. But let me first say, the fact that the Secretary of State came here, if only for, I believe it was 4.5 hours, is so important and is such a testament to how, frankly, this country, in its position as the chair in office for OSCE, the outstanding job that the foreign minister and his team and others at OSCE in Vienna worked through probably the most difficult year that OSCE has faced since its creation. With Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with all of these issues, it was incredibly difficult. And yet, the country was able to bring together leaders from around the world, including Secretary Blinken. And much of that was certainly for the Secretary of State's part. It was a testament to the importance that he sees within OSCE, but also of this country and its role in the region. And that is something that we recognize very much in the United States, that this country can play a role in bringing together different countries and different leaders with very different views, often at odds with each other and with hostility. This country can bring them together, as it has been doing since it became a country. That it can have different voices come together and reach agreement. So the Secretary's presence here was very, very important, and I hope that your listeners appreciate that was a real recognition of what an outstanding job this country has done. In terms of Assistant Secretary O'Brien's interview, I won't parse his words. He's a very, very smart person. He wanted to understand. He wanted to understand the views of all of the political players on the scene right now, and certainly wants to understand the opposition's plan. And I think that was a reflection of the fact that, to his satisfaction, he had not heard it yet. We also want to hear from any political leaders in any parties what their plan is for moving this country towards European integration. And that was the bottom line message.
Како ја коментирате актуалната обществено-политичка ситуација? Изминатиот период многу често се базираше на националистички наратив, пречеста употреба на термините албанизација, апартхейд, поставување крстови, меѓуетнички реакции и тензии.
It makes me very sad, frankly, because one of the great strengths of this country has been the fact that, unlike so many countries around the world, and including in this region, this country found its peace in 2001 with the Ohrid Framework Agreement. Ethnic Albanians and ethnic Macedonians and other ethnicities around this country have lived in harmony, have had challenges to overcome, but have lived in harmony and have lived together since this country's independence. That has been a model for many, many countries around Europe and around the world. And so to see ethnic differences used anywhere, whether it's in this country or my own, to be used for political purposes is heartbreaking. And I really call on all leaders to move away from that. That will never be helpful, and indeed it can be dangerous. And so to use these sorts of relationships for political purposes is shameful, quite honestly.
Партиите се договорија за датумот за изборите и заедничкото одржување на парламентарните избори и вториот круг на претседателските избори. Но не се договорија за промена на изборниот модел, на една изборна единица. Очекувате ли дека национализмот ќе доминира во предизборната кампања или конечно ќе преовлада економската понуда, платформата за борба против корупција во предизборните програми на партиите?
Yeah. Well, I hope that all of the parties come forward with their plan of what the next government would look like. The people, the citizens, the voters of this country deserve that, and I think they should demand it. And the issues that people care about are, as you say, the economy. They want to have a healthier economy. They want jobs and opportunities for their kids. They don't want their kids to move to Germany because they can't get a good job here. They want to know what each party proposes in terms of making this country stronger, better, and more prosperous. And that's what and part of that is addressing corruption. And so I think everybody should be very clear and very open about their plans, and then let the voters decide based on what their priorities are for this country.
Македонија е потресена од монструозното убиство на Панче Жежовски и 14 годишната Вања Ѓорчевска, Жежовски во Велес, Ѓорчевска во Скопје. Организаторите и сторителите се откриени, мотивите се уште не се доволно јасни. За жал, и овој настан не беше поштеден од политизирање, партизирање и непочитување на моментот на болка и на тага.
Well, so let me tell you very frankly that as I said earlier today, the system let that little girl down. These are criminals who were known to be criminals, who were violent criminals, who were not in jail. They had not been previously arrested and imprisoned. They hadn't been arrested and had the full prosecution of their previous crimes. They had not paid that price. And the little girl did, Vanya did. And it is heartbreaking. It is absolutely heartbreaking. And it is not a time for politicization. It is a time for the institutions of this country to take a cold, hard look at themselves and say, what more should we have done to protect this little girl and every other child in this country? Why are we allowing criminals to move about freely and to commit crimes on anybody else in this country? And so this is a tragedy, and I hope and pray that this country, the citizens and the institutions and officials look within themselves and see what should we have done what should we do now to make sure that this never happens again.
Амбасадорка, ви благодарам многу за интервјуто и пожелувам многу успех и среќа понатаму.
Thank you. Благодарам.
Стадион. Емисија за вашата вистина.